In a world yearning for change, there exists a community of visionaries and innovators, united by a common goal: to solve Earth's biggest challenges. From climate action to quality education, we're tackling all 17 Sustainable Development Goals reassembled as 10. We embody sustainability, unity, and empathy. Our character and reliability shine as beacons of hope. As role models for future generations, we're building a world where wisdom and consciousness rise, harmonizing life with nature and all species. Join us. Together, let's create a balanced, sustainable future for all.
Hello, Yella community. I think I hear myself twice. So just a second to mute myself if I am anywhere doubled. Awesome. A new Wednesday, a new highlight on awesome things that we have prepared for you today. And as some of you who are already subscribed to our newsletter know, that we just announced our global summit, our next global summit in October, that is called the Global Story. And this is also part of the most amazing project. We thought that it might move the needle in front of us and put us on the map when it comes to solve the SDGs sooner. Christina Imre here, the founder of TLL, Tech Leadership Lab. And today we are talking stories. Once upon a time, a little girl called Lisa Christina thought that how wonderful it would be if the world would be full of empathic people, nice people, no borders. You could go anywhere in the world and see those luscious trees and the vegetation and the biodiversity around you. And no matter with whom you are just gathering on the streets, you feel safe, you feel accepted, you feel loved. And this is how the stories start. And we at Tech Leadership Lab discovered that if there is something, an element that can unite us as a species and brings things further in a speedier way, that is a collective story that we choose to believe. And that is why we are now on a new journey in uncovering that global story together. And today's guest, who is no one else but our Lisa Atkinson, who you already know from our summit, because this is also post-dialogue or summit dialogue. She has a background that I don't even know where to start with, because Lisa, you are welcome to our show today. You went through Hollywood, Silicon Valley, you switched continents, you're a global citizen by yourself. You understand the power of storytelling and also the power of people uniting around the globe from a very holistic view, because you are concerned and engaged in all kinds of practices: technology, visual aesthetics, storytelling, futurism, foresight. And you lived in different places. You met so many people through the decades. I am so happy to have you back, because every time we discuss, we open up a universe about the possibilities we have as a species to just move that needle. Welcome to our show, because today we are talking Foresight Futurism and how we can connect through storytelling and create a future that we all desire to live in. Just let me unmute you. Yes.
Good morning. Good morning from Los Angeles. Can't say it's sunny Los Angeles, but it's Los Angeles. How are you today?
Oh, I'm very excited to talk about the power of stories, because, I was just posting today on LinkedIn about that quote from Steve Jobs, who said the most powerful person on earth is the storyteller. And you know what? I will just become one. So he understood that, as many other important figures through the history. How do you think? Why do you think stories are so impactful?
Well, as I'm fond of saying, and I've said it before, and I'll try not to be too redundant today, our first technology was the planet. From a human point of view, our first technology is the planet, organic technology that's alive and authentically intelligent. The second one would be our human body. That would be the second technology that we are immersed in, like literally immersed in. The third technology that we come into contact with would be our medicine. Medicine's a technology, an enabler for caretaking, and it's primarily about how to take care of yourself while in this suit on the planet Earth. And I'd say the next technology tool that we were given was story. And we were telling stories before we even knew how to speak. We were telepathing each other, communication with images and a type of audio, because as we know, all images, at least on the planet Earth, are carried through an audio signal. So even if we're not sounding out loud, we're still communicating, we're still broadcasting, telepathing story to each other. And of course, what we've learned is each one of us truly is unique, and each one of us truly has a unique point of view and perspective of reality, and therefore a unique observation, a unique story. So the power of story is the fact that each one of us has our own story, and that no two stories are alike. And when a person understands that, they're powerful. They're powerful in that they understand it's a diverse, unique, um, bioluminescent biosphere full of story. So, of course, story is powerful. And then the more conscious a person gets, and the more they demonstrate their consciousness through their story giving and their story sharing, but also the ability to receive story from others, then you're talking about people who are truly walking in their power.
Yeah, I was wondering because if someone see your background and CV. I mean, I have it in front of me, and I would take at least 10 minutes just to read it. You were involved in films and movies and storytelling and visual effects for so long, and part of one of my favorite movies. I mean, even if I start with the Twilight Zone, oh my God, I'm old, but the Twilight Zone, it was one of those series that it already creates a future where you start to imagine weird stuff that are around us and we don't even perceive them as much, but we start to perceive them. And so stories create a future, and there are so many evidences about this. And I wonder, when you started to envision the future, you have decades of thinking in movie form about, okay, what would be interesting for us to see, or what would the movie lovers want to see in this. Already switches your mind. It already creates a futurist from you early on. And how was in your case? How did you approach this futuristic approach at the beginnings of your career?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's very apropos for these times. I think my earliest influence, I'm fond of saying, is growing up on Algonquin Nation, traditional territory in Canada, where I got to see the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, often, as well as being able to look in the sky and see a lot of stars. And that influenced me more than I realized, because when you go out in the world and you start to visit other cultures and learn about other cultures, and you start to visit other languages and learn languages, and of course you're being taught from others, because they're translating their language and their culture to you, and that's how you learn it. That's when you realize how your early influences can be specific, small world, a smaller world view, or immense and infinite, a larger worldview. And so in my situation, when I started working with animation, first animation, uh, In fact, the first film I worked on was called Heavy Metal, and I worked with some of the best artists that I really love, like Mobius, who's a very famous futuristic artist. And what they taught me as we were drawing everything by hand and doing everything by hand, because it was pre-computers, believe it or not, technology moves quickly. They they brought out in me. They encouraged me to be myself and to bring my cultural influences into my self-expression. And so we never talked about what the audience wanted to see or needed to see or should see. You know, artists have a tendency of not being preachers or administering to humanity in a way that we're trying to usurp people's imagination by imposing on them. A lot of the artists behind the film, a lot of the artists, who illustrate books, we have a tendency of just letting our imagination uh, be infinite, and then channeling in imagery to go with the spoken word or to go with a script if it's a movie or a TV series. Uh, we're pretty open channelers, but our language is not just word and text, but it's also images. And so I can't even imagine what it would be like to think too much while trying to create a story. I don't know if I can think and storytell, or think and create story, or think and illustrate, or generate visuals at the same time. I've always been a channeler, and perhaps it's because I'm from the north, where the northern lights, and my norma was dancing colored lights every night, but also listening. Because when you live up north, you can hear the sky at night. And so when your normal is to see the infinite every night and a array of colors that you don't always see people wearing or decorating with, but you're also listening to the sky at night and what it has to say, well, then there's no reason to diminish your creative abilities, your ability to channel or be imaginative when you start working in cities or start working with other people or with corporations. Sometimes people don't understand where you're coming from because of their upbringing and what they've been exposed to in the world, or their perception of reality. But I've learned as a woman, it's really important to not self-censor. And even if somebody I meet doesn't quite understand where I'm coming from, that's okay, because that's the point. We're all individuals here. We don't have, except for the time that women are pregnant, each individual body houses an individual soul or individual spirit. And so the spirit of creativity is really honoring your uniqueness, whatever that means. And then when you go out in the world and you start working on, for instance, TV series like The Twilight Zone, you learn that part of your imagination is being used to imagine civilizations that have never occurred yet. Or perhaps you're being inspired by ancient civilization to reimagine the future and bring us full circle, so that we are tapping into the wisdom of our ancestors, those who came before us. And of course, we're all related. So we're tapping into our ancestry, our ancestors' stories. And perhaps sometimes our job is to go full circle. And so when we're imagining the future, we are actually using the wisdom of those who came before us. And it's not to repeat history, but it's to imagine something that's never been imagined before. It's to use the tools that we have to inspire ourselves, to channel in what's never been channeled in before, to visualize what's never been visualized before. The Twilight Zone was fun to work on because I was visual effects supervisor and post supervisor. So it was a combination of working with sound and pictures. But with the visual effects, it was the first show to ever use digital effects. So since we're a technology group, it was the first time we used digital computer effects in a movie or a TV series. And as a woman, I love to be cutting edge, not because I'm a woman, but because I have a tendency to go into and explore what's being birthed or incubated or gestated, and not quite out there, but ready to be out there. So, so I have a tendency of leaning towards the unexpected and the yet unseen, yet totally experienced by everybody on the planet. Twilight Zone was exploring that which was possible and bringing that into everybody's imagination. But it's one of those shows that teaches you a life lesson, which is you can present something to people and then they're going to do what they want to with it. Just like when a woman has a child, once the feeding tube is cut and the breathing tube is cut and the child is now birthed and independent of the mother, it's going to go its own way. And when you work on art for the masses, like TV series and movies, one of the lessons you'll learn really quickly is it's going to go its own way. Each person is going to hear what they're going to hear, see what they're going to see, interpret it how they're going to interpret it, and take it and integrate it into their life experience however they want to. And so as an artist, one of the takeaways when you work with Hollywood, for instance, is not just that the people you're working with in pre-production might not necessarily get what you're saying, but the audience, the final delivery to the audience, they're also going to hear what they hear and see what they see and interpret it in their own way. It's a powerful lesson. It helped me go around the world, live in many places, learn many languages, because I was open and I had already learned that everybody has their own way of doing things. And that allows you to learn language a lot more easily and communicate with people who don't necessarily speak the same language as you a lot easier, because you've learned to drop your expectation. But more importantly, you've learned to not impose your expectations on others.
Thank you for that. I want to also thank our viewers. Welcome to our show, and please feel welcome to join us in our conversation, ask questions, just add your 2 cents, whatever you want to share with the world, because we are here to co-create together a better future. And I just announced that we launched finally the page with our next summit and project, The Global Story, where you can register already for our October summit, which will be absolutely unique. And Lisa, you mentioned channeling. It's so interesting. This is what we've done. And since I began TLL Tech Leadership Lab, it was on my mind that this is not my creation. This is a co-creation. I'm in that kind of part of my journey where I am truly legacy driven for the future generations. So we had a lot of calls around TLL, and one of them was about what drives you and what do you want and why do you do things. From my perspective, is the future generations, and that is truly the way I see everything when I go into the future and I create from there, coming back. And channeling is the word that we never used it inside TLL, but basically this is what we've done starting day one. What is coming our way? At the beginning, it was the sandbox experiment. This is how I started. This is a sandbox. Let's see what type of people are joining. What is our initial story? And then it came the proof of concept with the first summit. There were different elements that I wanted to see. But then stage 3, now with the global story, it was all channeling. We had one question. What is the next quickest, most important, and effective step that can bring us closer to solve the SDGs sooner? And because things didn't add up, we realized that there are amazing people, individuals, organizations doing the job. We have the innovation, the technology. We could connect ourselves to the grid, but things don't happen fast enough, or there is something we are missing. And while listening to see that kind of wisdom that is coming our way from multiple directions globally, 2 words started to be shaped: narrative and story. And then it was that kind of a aha moment. Oh, wow, this is what is missing. Everyone is stuck on what's next because policymakers, decision makers are afraid that population would not agree with what they are doing. So things are stalling. Also, we fit in a box, and sometimes we forget that we are in a box and we don't get out to find that uniqueness and shaping the future the way we want to. We go back in the past and we just limit ourselves that, oh, this is the things were done always. No, not always. Things change, things shaped through history. And we have so many examples when stories just shifted us on a new trajectory of humankind. And movies shaped our perception about what is possible. We can talk today about movies that truly just open the doors to have cell phones, to have new technology, to have innovation, to think in possibilities, exactly what you're saying, and connect ourselves to ancestors to know from where we are coming, but then shape a future we all desire to have. And so, from your broad perspective, I am so curious. What would be your favorite movie you worked on, and why? If not, you can just give a cluster of movies for a particular reason you enjoyed working on.
Um, yeah, I'll answer that question in a larger way, of course. The f- so Twilight Zone was interesting because Twilight Zone brought me to China. I mean, I brought myself to China. I took a year off to travel around the world, backpack around the world, which everyone should do. But back then there was no cell phones, no internet, no ATMs, instant cash machines on the side of the wall. So it was a little trickier traveling. But Twilight Zone was the #1 TV series, the most popular TV series in China at the time. And so because of that, I got asked to teach at the Beijing Film School. And because of that, I also got to study at a film school, which wasn't open to me in Canada and the US because it was very hard for women to get into technology schools or film schools at that time. Everybody told me, sorry, as a woman, we're prioritizing with men. So I got
Oh,
to
wow.
study. Yeah, so I
This
got
is
to
another
study.
aspect we can discuss a lot. Yeah.
Oh,
But
well,
thank you
yes.
for
But
pinpointing this out. Yeah.
oh, well, thank you. So China was very embracive of women at that time, and because women hold up half the sky, and so they were very much wanted me to come and teach visual effects at the film school uh, because they really loved Twilight Zone. Partially because this was 1989, 1990. So all around the world, the Berlin Wall was falling, political systems were falling. Literally, when I was backpacking around the world, our plane was boarded in Fiji, and under machine gun, we were taken and held hostage for 3 days in the airport because a coup was happening. I went to Korea, martial law was happening. Beijing, martial law was happening. So it's interesting that Twilight Zone was a very popular series in the world at that time, which I didn't know until I started traveling. And so that's one because of all those reasons. It's not just working on it, it's because it's one of the few things I worked on that people really connected with everywhere I went in the world. And I was traveling on foot. And so I went into places that people didn't have TVs, or they had one community TV and it was black and white. Um, I found a lot of the famous movies I worked on because I'd worked on Star Wars and Star Trek and Batman and Robin, which was a big deal and coming out at the time in LA. But honestly, the majority of things I worked on, even Star Wars and Star Trek, most people in the world had not heard of them yet. And so they weren't influenced by them, and it wasn't part of their psyche. And that was a good thing, because what I learned while I was traveling was people's local stories, people's ghost stories, people's psychic, mysterious stories, because I noticed everywhere around when in the world, what connected me to others was my ancestral upbringing, with ghost stories in northern Canada and the Aurora Borealis. But working in science fiction and working on a lot of science fiction, like I said, Star Wars, Star Trek, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, X-Files, a lot of things that were very popular. I then got to apply those experiences working with those stories and visuals to when I went out in the world and started meeting people and found that 99% of the people on the planet were not influenced by Hollywood and had not seen what Hollywood was producing. And so we talked story. We talked ancestor story, which meant ghost stories, ancestor stories, which meant medicine stories, ancestor stories, which was their favorite story learning when they grew up. So what I got to learn was the impact of technology on culture, indigenous culture around the world. And that's one of the reasons I went around the world, was to write a book on how technology was impacting indigenous culture and indigenous cultural storytelling. And so what I learned by interviewing people everywhere I went, and being welcomed in people's homes, being welcomed into people's villages. I remember when Fiji, after the coup, I took the bus around the island, got off at a stop randomly at sunset in the woods, and there was nothing there. And somebody found me and said, "Come and stay in our village." So I had stayed in the long hut in the Fijian village, and they shared a meal with me, and we talked story. And those kind of experiences that I was really good at manifesting and drawing to me helped me realize that it wasn't Hollywood that had an impact on the world. In fact, most people had not even heard of Hollywood. And in fact, the Chinese film industry is 10 years older than Hollywood. And so you start to learn when you go out in the world, especially at this time, before cell phones, before computers, you start to learn what is story to other people. And it's not the story you're working on or the visuals you're working on or how it's received or how it's distributed to people. It's, does it connect to what people consider powerful stories? You see, there's the gap in reality, is that Hollywood always assumed that they had a global reach and a global power, and they don't. What has a global reach and a global power is, on one hand, the ancestral stories that we all hope to learn and grow up with, because they're stories about us. It's part of our collective pool of consciousness, our stories, because we're all related. Whatever your philosophy is, or your cultural beginning stories are, your origin stories as far as your cultural group or your religious group on the planet or your philosophical group on the planet. Most people I met on the planet, no matter what they were brought up with as far as a belief system, they all started from, there was just a few of us. So I found everywhere I went in the world, everybody related to me when I talked about when there was just a few of us at the beginning, when there was just a few of us. These were our stories. Share with me some of your stories. So I realized that technology is powerful because it's in the hands of everybody and it's being used to share our stories. It's not Hollywood that's powerful. It's not Hollywood producers or how much money at the box office makes. I'm always explaining to my mom that it doesn't matter what the box office is for a Hollywood film. It doesn't mean that people like the film. Like if a film makes $200 million in the first weekend, does it actually mean that people liked it? Or people just spent $200 million in the first weekend? And then if you interviewed them, they all go, "I don't like that story." You don't know if you like the story until you've heard it or seen it. So I realized that it wasn't the storytellers or the distribution system or the financing system of the storytellers that was powerful. It was the story and the connection, which means that technology plays a role in connecting people to sharing story and to actually learning from each other what is powerful story, what is powerful forms of communication. Channeling is an aspect of our human suit being an organic technology you have to wear on this planet. If you lived on Mars, you'd have a Mars suit. If you lived on the moon, you'd have a moon suit. We have an Earth suit. One of the technologies that's embedded into the suit is channeling, receiving from something you can't see, something you can't hear, something you have yet to imagine, some new insight. So we all have it. Now we're starting to enter into a decade where we're using these vocabularies. But what's powerful about learning ancient languages, which is what I did when I lived in China 10 years, I had to learn Mandarin. I wanted to learn Mandarin, but I also had to learn Mandarin because no one spoke English. And what I learned by learning ancient languages is that every word has multiple meanings. And then when you put them together, the sentence has multiple meanings. And when you put the sentences together, the paragraphs have multiple meanings. When you put the story together, the story has multiple meanings. And it all has to do with imagination, channeling and imagination. But in the ancient languages, they have words for everything because that's what they did. The population was small. They had a lot of stars at night. They had a lot of time, more time on their hands. They created words and images for everything. So there's like 10 words for story, 10 words for channeling, 10 words for intuition, 10 words for consciousness, 10 words for imagination. So when you go and spend time with the ancient cultures on the planet, their language is intact as much as it can be with colonization and other invasive human interaction the last 1,000 years. But it's not new to them. They live that way. So when you use the word channeling in China, they're like, oh yeah. They talk about channeling all the time. They talk about psychic phenomena all the time. They talk about medicine and the body, mind, and spirit all the time. They're brought up as children in Mongolia, Siberia, Tibet, China, Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, Korea, North Korea, South Korea, Japan. I'm thinking of the places I've been, spent time, Afghanistan, Hong Kong. I know I'm missing a few places, Singapore, Cuba, Vietnam, I already said. I was there a long time. New Zealand, Australia, all the nation states. I try to visit islands as much as possible, island nation states. Everybody has multiple words for what mainstream USA doesn't, because English is one of the newest languages on the planet. It's very small. It's very small. But when you get into the older languages, they have words for all of these things that are considered weird and strange for people who don't have it part of their everyday vocabulary. They're like, well, what does that mean, channeling? But then you go into other parts of the world and like, oh yeah, I channel that all the time. I channel this all the time. We all channel. We all channel. That's how we create. We're channeling. That's how we express our uniqueness and individuality. We're channeling. How do we meet our sustainable goals? We meet our sustainable goals by understanding that everybody has a different point of view. We're not a herd. And so we can't create herd mentality, pop culture approaches to solving climate change or educating climate change or educating more sustainable practices. What we can do is create story, which connects with people and brings the importance of living healthy, clean, prosperous, abundant lives to the forefront of our storytelling, because there won't be a single child you meet on the planet or adult that says to you, I don't believe in health. I don't believe in clean air. I don't believe in clean water. I don't believe in prosperity. I don't believe in peace. You meet anybody on this planet, including some of the war makers and people who are engaged in the warring aspects of the planet. If you talk to them, like even when I was held, at the airport for 3 days, under, soldiers, I chatted with soldiers for 3 days who were holding us hostage. Every one of them wanted to just get home and have a hot meal, get home to their own bed, have a hot meal cooked by their mom or their wife, or because there was, male soldiers at that time. And it really struck me. And then the same thing happened when I was in other countries and I got arrested a few times. And when I talked to people, including people who were, like theoretically keeping me under armed guard, when I talked to them and we shared stories, I discovered that there is this commonality that people often overlook, which is how important the everyday balance of living your life with more health and more happiness, more ease, more safety, more stability, more neutrality, self-determination, and prosperity, how that is ingrained in every single child. And they don't lose that value system. So no matter what the politics are around them, no matter what's going on with technology, and it may be beyond their comprehension in some way, or what's happening in outer space, and that may be beyond their everyday comprehension, the core at everybody, which is sustainable and can be tapped into to create sustainability on the planet, is this common shared belief that is more happiness, more health, more ease, more safety, more stability, more neutrality, more individual self-determination, and more individual prosperity is possible for each and every one of us. And so it's very important to approach the world that way, not as this mass consciousness or mass herd, or everybody's the same, or everybody thinks like Europeans, or everybody thinks like people in the US, and or the Americas. For those of us who aren't from the US, we don't call the US America. We call the Americas America, and we call the US the US because the US represents the US. It doesn't represent the Americas. And so things like that are really important game changers as to how people perceive the world, starting to use the vocabulary to describe the world and the value system that's important to everybody in our everyday conversation. That's how you reach people. You reach people through talking to them like you are sharing lunch with them, or better yet, breakfast. If every leader in the world had breakfast every morning with each other until they solved things, they would solve things much quicker, but more importantly, it would be a priority on their calendar that day. Oh, I have breakfast again with this world leader. Let's talk about this. Let's talk story. Let's talk the story about when we're not fighting each other anymore. Let's talk the story about when we have no more guns on the planet because we have no needs for guns. Let's talk the story of when we're all living together and sharing seeds and sharing trees and sharing caretaking of animals and birds and the ocean life on this planet. Let's talk about a story of when our scientists are cooperating and doing discovery. Let's talk about free medicine, or teaching, allowing the study of medicine, because we have a doctor shortage all over the world. Why not make studying medicine at university free everywhere in the world, and have the same education standards so that people can come and go wherever they're needed? And we have enough healthcare and healthcare practitioners to really bring people into a consciousness that allows them to feel abundant. It's hard to reach people with a sustainable message and sustainable goals and meet sustainable goals if people aren't feeling well. If people don't feel they have the ability to generate consciousness, more consciousness, to play a vital role, to be valued, to count, to matter. If people aren't feeling well, they're not going to feel like their life means anything, that they mean anything. They're not going to count themselves in. We can have as many protests globally as we want, saying your life matters, this life matters, this life matters, all lives matter, all cultures matter, all languages matter. We can have as many mass movements as we want, but until each individual treats themselves in a valuable way, that they truly are unique and the only one of their kind on the planet, until we have a planetary consciousness where people really understand their own intrinsic value, then how can they possibly feel well? And how can they feel well enough to contribute and feel like they have any power to make a difference? Most people are overwhelmed by all the talk, like you were saying, Christina. We can talk all we want, but how we meet these goals? And I think one of the ways we meet these goals is by generating more wellness, or at least infusing in people's imagination that they have the possibility, potential to be in charge of their own health care, to be in charge of generating more consciousness for themselves, that they count, that they matter. But it starts with them valuing themselves and stepping up and acting like they are valuable.
Yeah, these are deep questions, and my focus is, and everything that we are doing at DLL is to solve the SDGs sooner, to have a future for the future generations. And listening to you, I had 10 questions in one direction, then you switched gears. I had another 10 questions there. I said, oh my God, what should I ask you? Because this is such an important topic, and I want to enable somehow and bring your knowledge out today somehow. You are mentioning two aspects. It is very, very important to recognize individuality, ancestors, and your local type of uniqueness from where you are, because this way you are also grounded and you feel like included inside the society, let's say. On the other hand, we are going into this global citizenship model where I'm also preaching in this direction, because it's the only way to solve the SDGs. Those are not local. Those are not based on your borders. Those are for all of us. So how would you do it if you would have the influence and money in a way that you can preserve the local authenticity and uniqueness of people, the self-expression that they all need to have, but raise the planetary consciousness that, with that said, you also integrate yourself inside this global citizenship model in a way that it's effective and it makes you feel good?
Well, something that I've supplemented my life journey with is not just studying technology, but studying medicine. So I've been studying Tibetan medicine the last 8 years, possibly. And in fact, I just was with my Tibetan teacher who's visiting LA right now on Monday, listening to a talk and reconnecting. I also studied Chinese medicine in China, Native American medicine growing up in Northern Canada, and wherever I go, I study Indigenous medicine, plant-based medicine. And what they teach you is that we each have the capacity to generate our own consciousness. In fact, we do, right? We pour our consciousness in the morning and wake ourselves up. And then when we, need to regenerate our systems, we take the energy that we created during the day and we use that to fall asleep. And that energy is used up to actually do a regeneration process at night. So getting people on the same page as far as how the body works, the mind, the body, and spirit is really important. I don't mean that in a kind of a new agey esoteric way. I mean in a real practical science way. Because the ancient words, like Buddhism isn't a religion. Buddhism means the study of the science of the mind. And when I was talking to a head of there's a Himalaya university system. There's some of the oldest universities in the world, and they're in North India in the Himalayas. And they were doing some predictive work as far as where we're going to be 10 years from now. And when I was listening to all of their analysis of the astrology the last 3,000 years and their analysis of astrology for the next 2,000 years, they definitely saw that based on planetary movements and therefore how the planet movements are affecting planets and plants, therefore our food chain, that we do have the ability to grow our consciousness, over the next decade, for instance, to a tipping point where everybody feels better about themselves, better about their life, better about how they're living their life. How you reach individuals is you empower them with clean water, clean air, and clean food, because according to these ancient systems that I've been studying the medicine with, whether it's my Tibetan doctor or this head of the Vedic universities, Sanskrit universities in India, as two examples, or Native American medicine, or Chinese medicine, or Korean medicine, or Japanese medicine, African medicine when I was in Africa studying African medicine. They all say the same thing: is we generate consciousness through what we drink, which is clean water. what we breathe, which is clean air, and what we eat, which is clean food. Not processed food, not junk food, but fresh fruit and vegetables. And so if you understand that our body, to generate consciousness, to hold consciousness, to be well, and to evolve consciousness, needs clean air, clean food, and clean water, well, then that would be my focus, is understanding that that is part of our medicine, not just self-care, but clean water, clean food, and clean air. Then I would say, to answer your question, if I had $1 gazillion, I would be focused on educating people how important clean water, clean air, and clean food is, that if they eat and drink and breathe cleanly every day, they will wake up the next day more conscious and feeling better in their own body and in their own life and in their own community, in their own family, their own community, their own nation. They will feel better about everything. They won't feel helpless, right? Because people feel powerless and helpless because consciously they don't know how to generate more consciousness. And consciousness is tied into your ability to imagine more. And so that's what we're really talking about. And my throat gets dry.
And if we would
Need
connect
water.
water, yes, of course. If we would connect this to our topic, storytelling using foresight and futurism, having these basic needs met and the importance of them for the global population, how we can accelerate things using storytelling in your view?
Well, we tell stories about how we function, how our bodies work. We create great science fiction stories, and I love science fiction, and I'm writing some myself. But
I wonder how much science fiction and how much is just creating the future, just showing the future.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You're being intuitive. You must be channeling. It's bridging that gap between fantasy and working the energies on the planet, these warring energies where people are creating fantasy movies where everyone just kills each other as basis of solutions. Oh, how are we going to solve this problem? Well, let's kill all these people. The them versus us, very old historical patterns that don't make any sense. In fact, it's pretty insane. So if we make less stories that focus on those solutions, and we start to create stories that actually are science fiction and science fact combined. So people are and that's what I specialize in. I tried to work on scripts where there was science fact woven into the science fiction. So it seemed like what we were educating people about how their mind, body, and spirit worked was some science fiction-y notion of how it works. People were very open and receptive because we weren't delivering it as a science fact lecture on a podium. We were delivering it as a science fiction message in a film. So people are really open. Even the most conservative, rigid people on the planet will take something away from a science fiction movie because they don't realize you're criticizing their political leader, or they don't realize you're criticizing their lifestyle. They think you're talking about some future, some other planet, some other civilization, and they're open to the possibility. When you start lecturing people that what they're doing is wrong, what they're thinking is wrong, what they're eating and drinking is wrong, how they sleep at night, how they generate sleep, how they regenerate their body and their mind and their spirit at night, then you bump up against people's perceptions of reality, their belief systems. And that's where people start to be in conflict with each other, right? Conflicts escalated, they become into full-fledged wars because people don't know how to solve it otherwise because they're stuck in this conflict energy. Like, I'm stuck in a conflict bubble and I don't know how to get out of it, or a conflict moment and I don't know how to get out of it. So how do we transform story to help transform people's imagination, what they're currently imagining as solution-based choices? Well, it's simple. You take science fiction and you merge the science fact in with it in a way that it's not imposing on people or criticizing people or bumping too much into their belief system. So how do you create a story basis that honors everybody so they don't feel wrong or criticized, the them versus us mentality on the planet. But how do you raise the communication on the planet? So we're talking about raising the cleanliness of the water, raising the cleanliness of the food, raising the cleanliness of the air, raising the cleanliness of storytelling. I'm not saying storytelling is polluted or dirty. I'm saying that there's conflict, stories that generate conflict, and stories that generally generate conflict are also generating solutions in those conflict movies that are themselves conflict-based solutions. So generating stories where the solutions are not conflicting, but they're actually embracing is really important. So we need to harness the imaginations of people on the planet to be able to imagine new stories, or take the ancestral stories that weren't based on conflict. You know, all of our favorite stories that we learned growing up weren't ones where everybody died. Like most children are like, "Oh, don't tell me that story again." You know, that's not their favorite bedtime story, right? Most people's favorite bedtime stories, whether it was oral tradition or whether it was in a picture book, are stories where there's a happy ending. Now, how do we be optimists, but as women, particularly since you and I are women today, how do we become optimistic storytellers, imaginative storytellers, but we're not ridiculed? You know, we're not creating conflict by being different or being optimistic, because for some people on this planet who are immersed in conflict and really do believe that conflict and combat and a competition are the ways to manifest anything on this planet, you know, the old school way, there are some people really hooked into that, right? They're still hooked into that energetic force of that's how we solve problems. So for those of us who use our imagination and live our lives where we're not creating problems, and when we do encounter problems, we are using our imagination to transform the situation into more than what the other people have imagined. That's a true storyteller, right? So it's redefining what a storytelling is, redefining who storytellers are, which is everybody, and redefining how we tell our stories so that we are able to reach people and not seem like we're goody two shoes or we're just out to lunch, you know, like, oh, you're living in some fantasy world. If you had real life experience, you too would buy a gun. Now, I'm living in the US. What can I say? But, you know, I'm Canadian living in the US and, you know, coming from the Indigenous North. So we don't have guns. Our story is how we connect to each other. If there's a conflict, you sit everybody down and you tell a story which you hope has a message which inspires everybody to think outside of the capsule that they're stuck in. Because when you get two people in conflict, they're both in their own capsule inside their heart. One person's encapsulated inside their heart by their story. The other person is encapsulated inside their heart with their story. Well, how do you get them to dissolve those capsules so that they are then just living in their hearts and they can see more and hear more and sense more than when they were encapsulated and isolated inside their own heart, fighting, you know, and feeling conflicted with everything outside them. Because generally people who feel conflict or love conflict are people who you'll discover many aspects of their life are in conflict. And so it's like they're encapsulated inside their heart. Their clear light inside their heart is in this capsule. And it just needs to be dissolved. And then they're set free and their imaginations are freed and their thought transference is set free. And then they're able to go, oh, there's more. There's more out there. There's what I have yet to imagine. And so some people, when you talk to people on the planet, some people have not learned that it's not what you're imagining that counts. It's what you haven't imagined yet that is even more important than what you're currently imagining. So being creative isn't about, oh, everything I've already imagined. Being creative is knowing that what's really important is what I haven't imagined yet, what I haven't even imagined is possible yet. And then freeing your thoughts, freeing your creativity, freeing your mind, your body, and your spirit to know that whatever situation you're in, no matter how conflicting it is, you focus on what you have not imagined yet is possible. That's called potential. And then you put your attention and your energy into potential. What hasn't happened yet, what hasn't been imagined yet, what is possible, but you just haven't imagined it yet. Knowing that when you wake up tomorrow morning, you may have generated in your sleep cycle an openness to all this new potential and possibility. And suddenly you wake up the next day imagining something that you couldn't imagine the day before, but you're waking up going, yeah, okay, there it is. There's the solution. So teaching people that solutions are based on imagination, not weapons, like physical material objects, but in our heart and mind and our gut, bringing all of ourselves into alignment, potentializing our power, potentializing our imagination. That's what resolves, transforms, dissolves limited perceptions of reality. Because that's what patterns are. When people get into habit, oh, I'm going to solve this through, armed conflict, or I'm going to solve this through hating my next door neighbor, or I'm going to solve this through being a political animal at work, in the workplace. If you story tell and story share, where you give other examples of being and living and choosing, well, then that's real type of empowerment. You leave people to choose their own way because it's their journey, it's their path to walk. Everybody is here for their own specific reasons to have the experience they're going to have. We truly are individualized. And so it's important to respect the individuals and their individual journey and not compare our journeys to each other, but understand each journey is equally important, but present a larger story, which is you choose. So there's a really, and I'll end at this note because I know you have a million questions because you said you did.
We are at the top of the hour, if you can imagine. Our
Yeah,
hour is
well,
just ended.
one of the most powerful things I learned with language is that the word destiny in the ancient language means living the result of your choices. So it's not fate or faith, destiny, it's something preordained, like, oh, the book of my life was written before I came into this body, and now I'm just living this, circumstance. And my job is to play tennis with it every day. Respond, react, respond, react. Don't lose sight of the ball. Respond, react, respond, react. But, in the ancient languages, the word destiny, fate, faith means living the result of your choices, that you wake up the next day and what you're living is a result of some choice you made along the way, consciously or unconsciously. You're living the result of your choices. That's true empowerment. When a person really gets that, then I'm like, oh, I better stop choosing, putting my, voting with my money by watching super violent films. I mean, for me, I don't get anything out of it. I just, doesn't feel right to me to watch people kill each other, and I don't find that entertaining. Maybe because I worked in conflict zones and I saw people in real life killing each other, and I saw that didn't lead anywhere. That just made a big mess everywhere in everybody's hearts that took generations to transform. But whatever my reasons, I just don't find violence entertaining. So my money doesn't go there. I just don't spend my money on things that are violent. That's my choice, but I don't put other people down for making their choices.
Lisa, my job is absolutely difficult because we are done with the time. We go a little bit just to end it, but I don't even know what to ask right now because I had a myriad of questions and every phrase of yours just brought another one. I wanted to discuss so many things, so maybe we should just start a streaming service, or to have one day on TLS channels to just discuss and go in depth, because it also frustrates me that we cannot go in depth in some topics that are so crucial because of time limitation, and I want to just erase this time limitation. Stories, as we know, they have components and are important to hook the audience and bring them through a journey through the resolution phase. So you start with a character, you have a context, you have a place in time, and so on. And every story needs something. I mean, if it's about sci-fi, it can be conflict, but it can be intrigue, it can be suspense, it can be something that just creates the struggle, the journey of the hero, or any type of other struggle, even if it's a mind struggle that we are going through. We cannot just isolate out or delete the conflict. But if you would create the global story that unites humankind today, what would be those elements of the story you would include in that super amazing movie that would ignite the world to think about a potential positive future where we are connected as global citizens? What would be those elements? Because I'm so interested, and this is part of our mission now during our phase 3 Tech Leadership Lab, the Global Story Project.
Well, in the Hollywood sense, I remember, because I started as a storyboard artist, I remember we talked story. And for me, I was always looking for passion, the passion of the characters. And I would always think, well, okay, this person's passionate about this, about that. But how does the audience connect to that person's passion? Because one person's passion is another person's boredom, right? They fall asleep. But as I studied medicine around the world and I started learning to speak other languages, I realized that a lot of the medicines in the world, ancient medicines, share this triangle of three things: wisdom, compassion, and power. And so a lot of the ancient medicines have this triangle, whether it's in your forehead or your throat or your heart or your gut. There's this triangle of wisdom, passion, or compassion. That wasn't an accident. Wisdom, compassion, and power.
Good one.
And when you combine, and remember, energy isn't about the individual energies. That's where people get caught up in trying to manifest things and getting disappointed because they don't think they're manifesting really well. It's about how energy combines. When we wake up in the morning, we're not living an energy I chose the day before to create something, or an energy that I spotted that was inspiring to me. I'm living the combination of energies. So when you look at power, it's powerful. You look at wisdom, wow, wisdom. You look at compassion, yeah. But when you look at the triangle, which is the space inside, what's in the space inside? The space inside is you, because you're at the center of your life until you die. You're at the center of your body until you die. You're at the center of your mind until you die. And so when you realize that all energy you interact with combines, and you're actually surrounded by it. So, even when you get a literal and say, okay, the top of this is compassion, over here is power, over here is wisdom, but you're living the result of the combination of those three things, what's inside the triangle. And as we know, you're at the center of the triangle, which means you're living the combination of these energies. But nothing is flat. Everything is holographic, multidimensional, which means the triangle has many facets, many faces, many sides, to the point where it's so infinite there are no sides. And so that means we're always surrounded by these energies that we have consciously or unconsciously been interacting with, generating, living, choosing. So how would I translate that to tell a powerful story, or to pick one word? I would say the energetic effects. We in storytelling, you do have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's traditional storytelling. But when you think of ancient storytelling, indigenous storytelling, you're getting the energy of the ride. As the person's telling the story, you start listening, And then you're taken on this energetic ride until the end of the story. You're being changed all the way through the story. You're being inspired all the way through the story, not just the beginning, the middle, and the end. You're not just getting a point of view across. We've all seen in movies or TV or in books where somebody listens impatiently and goes, okay, fine. What's the moral of the story? Just cut to the chase. What's the moral of the story? Why are you telling me the story? I don't get it. Why are you telling me the story? But it's not about, okay, in one sentence, this is what the story is about, and this is why I'm telling it. It's about the combined effect of listening, deep listening. Whether you're a deep listener or a shallow listener, there is an energy exchange that's occurring. You're already changing. Inside you, everything you're listening to, every visual that you're bringing into your body is changing you. So it's really about the power to know that. So how do we translate in storytelling this education? That you are constantly changing. Everything is constantly changing you, but you're at the center. You're at the center of this triangle. But everything else is swirling around you. The combined effect of everything. How do you maintain your sense of self? Your clear light, your clear sense of self. Some people call it groundedness. Some people call it self-centeredness. Some people call it self-realization. Some people call it self-awareness, self-consciousness. How do you not get lost in space? How do you create your own value system and live it? How do you create your own justice system and live it? How do you not get lost with all the stuff that's happening in the physical realm? How do you translate that in story? You make that important part of the storytelling, that you're actually telling people things that are helpful to them to live a happier, healthier, easier, safer, stabler, neutral, self-determining, prosperous life. So we make the kind of stories we tell important. Therefore, we fund stories that are important to health and well-being. And we stop funding stories that are not contributing to increasing our prosperity, our individual prosperity, our individual health, our individual happiness, our individual stability, neutrality, safety, ease. It's really hard when you travel the world and you meet people who are absolutely convinced life is not easy and it never will be for them, or life is not safe, or your body is not safe, or your mind isn't safe. It's hard when you meet people who don't feel safe in their own mind, body, and spirit. And so if we create stories and fun stories that allow people to really explore that they're more than they think they are, then that's the other, that's the marriage of what we talked about earlier about, yes, everyone counts, everybody matters, and yes, your life matters, because it goes into the collective pool of consciousness. It's part of this giant energy that is combining and dancing together that we're all breathing and living in. I'm breathing in the story of somebody what somebody went through yesterday in Seoul, Korea. I'm breathing that energy that person generated, that consciousness that person generated yesterday. I'm breathing that in today. There's no escaping it. That's part of our atmosphere. It's part of how the planet generates consciousness and energy. And so really deciding, what are we going to fund? Voting with your money. Research companies before you buy their running shoe to find out whether they're treating the workers well, or exploiting the planet's resources, or mining things and creating, using slave labor. Really, really understanding, where is my money going?
This is a very good last message, Lisa. We need to wrap up where your money goes, because there is a lot of money and power and influence in this world, sometimes not in the right hands, but some of the power and influence, it is on the right hand. So those of you who have that, because we need to set up the global story here. You brought some very, very important and new aspects here about how we envision to create the global story project and the elements of the story. And the indigenous thing, maybe we should have another show just on the indigenous way to connect with the past and create the future, and also the way they see this energetical flow and energetical ride, as you said, about everything is just like an experiential journey through
Well,
it.
that story is an excellent story, and it needs to be taught by Indigenous storytellers, because, of course, cultural appropriation is a problem all over the world with capitalization and monetization of everything, including people's cultures. So it's so important to actually have the Indigenous storytellers be in front of the microphone and be in front of the camera to actually authentically share with us their culture, because
Yes.
they're the ones who are also, through their story, keeping it alive, doing their best to keep it alive. So it's really important, again, voting with your money and making sure if you're going to buy something Indigenous, you buy it from an Indigenous person and not a fake Indigenous company.
And include proportionately every culture, every ethnicity, every part of the world. And for sure, they are welcome. And most than sure, we will have at our summit someone who will talk from this angle. And until then, and after that, I'm super, super excited to work with you on our global story together, where we just bring together our expertise and create something that can ignite a rapid shift into the right direction, because this is what we believe here, and this is why we are here, that agile, rapid arm that can help what is out there already, but in a more effective way maybe today. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being with us today. This was absolutely a pleasure. It was a thought-provoking, deep, almost like a meditation session, where you brought in so many essential aspects about human nature, what we need to have, what we need to consider, focus on: water, air, food. Have the right thing, basic needs. If they are not met, you cannot expect much from people, because they are just worried and in a stress, survival, instinctus type of life, and that's not good for anyone. And with that said, I need to make some announcements as well. DLR community, we will meet again on Friday. We have an extra event this week with our new partner, Strategic Doing Institute, and they have a curriculum, and not just that, but also a way of finding and covering ideas, and then putting decision makers at the table and finding the ways to enable global change, but starting small, starting locally, and then expanding in your county, in your region, in your country, and all over the world. They are bringing to us a new way of assessing how global cooperation can happen. We are having amazing partners already for our Global Story project and our research body, where we have the best experts in their fields. And Strategic Doing Institute, it's one of them when it comes to decision making, when it comes to transforming ideas into action. So this is super important for our Global Impact Attack Leadership Lab. On Friday, we will have an event here on Zoom, but it's also on LinkedIn, so search for it. I hope my colleagues will share it in the chat, the link to the event on LinkedIn. And hopefully you will come, because this will be also as a brainstorming session where we will focus on ways to tackle the Global Story project and how we can work with that in a way, in the most effective way, as we discussed today with Lisa Atkinson, an amazing individual with so much wisdom that connects us with what truly matters as humanity. With that said, Christina Imre, the founder of Tech Leadership Lab, says bye for now, and see you the next time on Friday, and for sure next week with a new episode that will be very, very interesting again, and will highlight someone who is also part of the Global Story mission and endeavor that might be the most interesting, intriguing, and comprehensive global story, global research story, and project around what can unite us together collectively on what matters. Bye for now.
In a world yearning for change, there exists a community of visionaries and innovators, united by a common goal to solve Earth's biggest challenges. From climate action to quality education, we're tackling all 17 Sustainable Development Goals reassembled as 10. We embody sustainability, unity, and empathy. Our character and reliability shine as beacons of hope. As role models for future generations, we're building a world where wisdom and consciousness rise, harmonizing life with nature and all species. Join us. Together, let's create a balanced, sustainable future for all.